Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley here for Pinkfresh Studio. Thanks for joining me today. Today I wanted to share a video on how to use the brand new Garden Party dies and coordinating stencils. If you've never used a product like this from Pinkfresh Studio before, I think you're gonna love the results, but this video should make it really clear on how to use these stencils and dies together. Now this is a 4 stencil set, but I wanted to point out that stencils 2 and 3 are actually on the same sheet. That helps save cost. So I'm just showing you through the individual stencils, and you'll notice the little triangles on each of those stencils. Those are there to help you with alignment, and I'm going to show you how to use those since you're not lining it up with a stamped image or a hot foil image. Now, the other cool thing about these stencils is that there is some overlap or some bleed designed into the stencils. That means that if your die cutting is a tiny bit off, you are not totally lost. So this will make a lot of sense as we move forward, and I'll show it to you after we do our die cutting as well. So I'm starting out with a sheet of white cardstock, and I'm starting out with stencil number 1. Now take it from me, you can totally mess this up and put this upside down because you're not lining up to anything. But I'm going to hold that stencil in place, and the first thing I'm going to do is stencil in all those little triangle areas that will help me kind of mark out and line up the next stencil as I move along. I am doing a little bit of masking so that I can do each of these florals in a different color, and I'm starting with my 1-inch blending brush and blending lightly over the entire area, and then I'm coming in with a 1/2-inch blending brush and adding some depth and darkness around the edges. And you can see I went back to the lighter color to kind of smooth all that out, and I felt like that was a little orange for me, so I brought in a little cherry blossom over the entire thing to kind of push it towards the pink side as well. Now for this next floral, I am using the Coral Reef ink, and I'm going to come in around the edges with some passion fruit. And this got a little heavy in one part, and so again, I will go back to the Coral Reef ink with my 1-inch blending brush to kind of smooth all that out once I get all my blending in place. Now I have left all the blending in this video, and the reason that I've done that is that I'm using several colors, but also I wanted you to see how we go through this blending process for the entire thing. Now obviously the masking is optional, so you can either do that or you can color these all in one color and do several of these to get multicolored flowers. But for these bottom 2 floral images, I started out with the cherry blossom ink and added a light layer of peach fuzz or coral reef over those. Now here's stencil number 2. Stencil number 2 is just the top portion of the sheet, and stencil number 3 is on the bottom. So we're going to line up stencil number 2, and we're using the triangle guides on the stencil to position this in the correct place. So you can see I have those 2 triangles lined up with my previously inked triangles, and I'm only going to blend the top. So I'm showing you with my finger, I'm making a delineation in my mind over the top versus the bottom, and if it helps you, you can put a little piece of masking tape. Now that I have those ready to go, I'm going to ink with the Coral Reef ink some of these images and bring in a little passion fruit. I didn't even re-ink that brush. I just brought in what was already there. And then I'm also using a little bit of candy violet on some of these smaller florals. Now these florals are pretty small, so I'm using my small 1/2-inch blending brush, and they were a little bit purple, so I brought in just a little bit of coral reef over those. Now it's time to move on to stencil 3. So I'm removing the magnets and the masking tape, and then I'm going to shift this up to where, again, the triangles align with the previously inked areas. So you can see how that little triangle is going to nest right in there. There is not very many images on this particular stencil. So stencil number 3, it's just some floral centers. So I'm using some peach fuzz ink. That felt a little too bright, so I brought in some warm buff to kind of warm it up. And then I thought, nah, it's still not the right color. So I grabbed sweet mustard. So I'm just mixing some colors here until I get what I want. And now it's time to move on to stencil number 4. Again, lining up the stencil with the previously inked triangles, making sure that those are nesting into the areas that I need them. And then I am going to ink over the entire thing with sage. Now, this is all of my greenery. So I'm going to go through all of the greenery and ink with the sage ink with the 1-inch blending brush. And I love these new blending brushes. They give you such a soft, light blend of color, and it really is beautiful, especially with these lighter colors. Now, I did want there to be some shadow and shading on these, so I'm moving on to eucalyptus, and I'm adding a little depth towards the base or towards the tips of the greenery. No rhyme or reason. I'm just adding some different shading in there to make the images a little more interesting. And that is all of the stenciling that's necessary for this garden party design. So I can remove the stencil, and I'm going to remove my paper from this grip mat by rolling the mat away from the paper. Trust me, this thing can get sticky, and it can like rip your paper if you try to just rip the paper off of it. So here is the completed stencil design, and they don't look like a whole lot just yet, but that's where the magic of the die comes in. It's going to add some details. Now, to align the die, I'm going to look through the openings in the die, and I'm going to make sure that those triangles are lining up with the triangles that I inked on my background. So I'm just going to position this, and remember, we have a little bleed, so if it's not exactly perfect, this should work out. Now, I am going to hold this in place with a little bit of low-tack tape as I run it through my die cut machine because I don't want anything to shift because we could be in trouble then. And I'm going to lay this onto my cutting plates and run it through my Anna Griffin Impress die cutting machine. Now, this is not only going to cut out the outer edge of these die cuts, but it's also going to add some details and some veinings to all of these florals and greenery pieces that we've created. Really beautiful. And I'll hold up my little negative piece here to show you that bleed that I'm talking about that the stencil allows for. So as I hold up this cardstock, you'll notice some color around the outer edge of each of these die cut pieces. That is how the stencil allows you a little bit of wiggle room so that if you don't get your die exactly in place, you have a completed image. Now I went ahead and did some foiling, and I'm foiling one of the nested elongated ovals onto a panel of white cardstock. I don't actually use this, but I'm showing you this because it was part of the process of the creation of this card, and I thought you might appreciate it. While I have all of my foiling supplies out, I'm also going to foil my sentiment, and I'm using the Here For You sentiment set. This is the press plate set. It's also available in a stamp set. So I've laid those on my Glimmer platform. I've allowed the platform to heat up, and then I press the timer button. When the timer is complete, I'm going to remove the platform from the base and take this over to my die cutting machine. I'm adding some blush foil with the pretty side facing towards the pretty side of my plates. I'm adding some Concord and Ninth white cardstock and then 2 shims that come with the Glimmer system. And I'm going to run that through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine to press that foil onto the cardstock. And aren't those absolutely beautiful? I love the rosy kind of blushy coppery color of this foil. So now that I have my foiling completed, or what I think is all of my foiling completed, we're going to go back to this in just a bit. I'm going to take the coordinating dies and die cut all of my sentiments, and then I'm going to take the coordinating nested elongated ovals die and die cut the center of that oval out. Now, originally when I created or when I was designing this card in my head, I thought I would make a window card and have these florals kind of back behind this oval opening, but I kind of switched gears here. Now you'll notice I'm saving that oval that's on the inside of that I've die cut out, and I'm going to actually arrange all of my florals onto that oval. But first, I am going to assemble some of these florals with layers. Now you could absolutely use all of the individual little floral pieces on their own, or you can layer these die cuts up. I think both ways are great ways to use this and a great way to get more out of this die. But I decided to add some depth and dimension and some varying colors to each of these florals by doing a little layering. So you can see here, I'm adding a layer on top of this coral reef passion fruit floral. This is more of like the peach fuzz color, and I'm adhering it in the center and allowing the petals to kind of fold up. I'm actually folding them up with my tweezers. And then I'm going to set this aside and assemble another floral. Now this one is the more orangey floral, and so I decided to bring in a little bit of that candy violet in the center, and I am using those yellow floral centers on each of these as well. So you can layer up as many or as few as you want until you get the look that you like. Again, there are really no rules to this set, so once you have your pieces die cut, you can use your imagination and either use these smaller florals on their own, you can layer them up. It's just kind of fun to experiment with different ways to use the same die set. So you can see I'm finishing up the layering here, and then I'm going to start arranging my florals and my greenery. And to do this, at this point, I still thought I was going to create a window card. So I'm just assembling this onto that oval shape that I die cut so that I know where everything's going to land in my window. So I did use a variety of different foam adhesive or liquid glue to place these onto this oval just to create varying dimensions and depths. I kind of was thinking like shadow box card at this point. So you'll see me kind of just tuck things in. I'm using my tweezers. I like to kind of keep the larger florals together to create a strong focal point on this arrangement and then tuck in some of the smaller floral arrangements around those. Once I have my florals in place, I'm going to start placing the greenery. And this is where I started to kind of shift my mind from that window card to maybe this is just a standalone element. So for all of the greenery, I actually used liquid glue to adhere it because I want the florals to kind of stand out as the focal point. So I'm just adding little bits of liquid glue to the end of these stems and tucking them in. And I will surround the upper part of the arch with some greenery as well. Now, there were a few gaps in my design here that I really felt like I need a little bit more greenery, and at this point, I had pretty much used it all. So I was a little bit stuck, and I set this aside while I started working on my sentiment. So I decided to use the thank you sentiment, and I die cut 3 additional layers from white cardstock to stack these up. And sometimes moving on to a different portion of the card really helps clear my mind of the last thing and helps me think of it in a new way when I come back to it. So I knew I was going to stack up these sentiments. I went ahead and moved on to this portion. And you can see that I like to lay all of my layers out on my desk surface or my work surface. And I like to put the liquid glue on the front of the 3 plain ones and then pick up the one with the foil and just start stacking it up with the other layers behind it. This is the quickest way rather than picking up and putting down the glue. And I'm just using my fingers to make sure all the edges are in alignment with each other and just pressing that down. I can put a block on this if I feel like I need to. Now here's where it dawned on me. I want more greenery, and so I'm just going to make more greenery. And the way that I did this was taking some of this sage ink, and I'm just making a large ink blended area on the bottom of this scrap piece of cardstock that I already used. And I'm going to position the die where just the greenery is overlapping this ink blended piece, and I'm going to die cut that. That's going to give me some more greenery to work with. I didn't worry about shadows and shading. If you wanted to do that, then you could go ahead and add some shading before you pop it out of the negative space. But that was a quick way for me to create more greenery without having to go through all of the process of the stencils again, because I knew I just needed more greenery. I used some of this greenery to tuck in on the left side of my sentiment where it's going to overlap my floral grouping. So I just added liquid glue onto the back of my stacked up sentiment, added a few little layers of greenery there, and then I added a little bit more to my oval, and then I decided to go ahead and trim off around the top. This is where I really felt like this could be a standalone element on its own, and I thought it would make a beautiful design to just kind of have this popped up on the front of the card. So I'm going around the top of this oval, and I'm using some long blade scissors to just trim off any overhang that I have. Now on the bottom portion, you'll notice that I allowed the overhang to remain, and that was just a design choice. I did that on purpose. And look at this on this beautiful kind of warm gray base. I thought this was so pretty, and that's when I decided that's where I'm going with this. So I went back to that nested elongated oval press plate that I used in the beginning to create my window. And I'm positioning that onto my card front. So this is my card base. It's an A2 card base. I'm holding it in place with a piece of removable tape. This is the yellow tape that actually comes with the Better Press system. It's great for hot foiling as well because I don't find that it leaves a lot of adhesive behind once I foil it. And I'm trimming down my blush foil. Now with that tape, I've created a hinge. So I'm going to flip that press plate open to where I can slide my blush foil onto my card front, pretty side to pretty side. So in this instance, the pretty side is actually facing up towards the camera. And then I'll close that elongated nested oval right on the top there. And I'm going to open my card base because I don't want 2 layers of cardstock. That's going to be too much pressure. So I opened the card base, I laid that face down onto my Glimmer hot foil system, and I'm waiting for the platform to be ready. In the meantime, I'm positioning my sentiment onto the lower right-hand portion of this oval that I've created, this like little scene, and I am using some foam adhesive for that. Once my platform is ready, I'm going to hit that timer button. And once the timer's done, you can see I already have my plates on top because I have my hot foil piece taped in place. I'm going to run this through my Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and you're going to see that I have a perfectly placed oval on my card front. And that's because I started out by using that tape to kind of create a hinge to hold my hot foil plate in the perfect position and allow me to kind of be in control of where this ends up on the cardstock. So now that I have this ready to go, I'm taking some low dimension foam adhesive. This is about 1 millimeter thick, and I'm placing it on the back of the oval. I already have a lot of dimension with the sentiment and the florals on the oval, but I did want this to still kind of rise up a little bit once it was nested inside that oval. So there you have it. I finished this card off by adding some clear drops using my dual-tipped embellishment tool, but I think this card turned out so beautiful. It's just a very simple yet elegant design, and I think it would work for a variety of occasions by just switching out that sentiment. I hope you kind of took away some great tips and tricks for using this new Garden Party stencil and coordinating die from Pinkfresh Studio. As always, I want to remind you that I will have links to the featured products used in this project in the YouTube description below. So if you're looking for anything in particular, be sure you check there. I want to say thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this project, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here so you don't miss any of the paper crafting and card making video tutorials shared. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.